Expectation warfare, invisible power. Listen up. Every single day, people are trying to control you through the expectations they set in your mind. Your boss expects you to respond instantly. Your friends expect you to always be available. Your partner expects predictable behavior. And like a puppet, you dance to these expectations without realizing someone else is pulling the strings. You're being controlled, and you don't even see it. Here's what they're not telling you. Expectations are the most powerful form of control that exists. More powerful than threats. More powerful than force. More powerful than direct commands. Because expectations operate invisibly. They shape behavior without confrontation. They control actions without obvious manipulation. And the person being controlled thinks they're making their own choices. Right now, you're living your life according to expectations other people installed in you. You respond to messages quickly because someone taught you that's expected. You show up reliably because someone convinced you that's what good people do. You behave predictably because unpredictability makes others uncomfortable. Every one of these patterns is someone else's expectation controlling your behavior, and you comply automatically without questioning who set these rules. The brutal truth: whoever controls expectations controls behavior. Set low expectations and people will underperform. Set high expectations and people will stretch to meet them. Set conflicting expectations and people will paralyze themselves trying to satisfy impossible standards. Expectations are behavioral remote controls, and most people don't realize they're being operated. But here's the power move nobody teaches you. You can reverse this. Instead of dancing to others' expectations, you can strategically create, manipulate, and manage expectations to control how people behave around you, all without ever directly commanding them. This is invisible power. This is expectation warfare. And once you master it, you'll control behaviors and reactions without anyone realizing they're being controlled. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. The most effective princes didn't rule through constant commands and visible force. They ruled by carefully managing what people expected. When people expected generosity, the prince could be occasionally generous and be seen as extraordinarily giving. When people expected strictness, the prince could be occasionally lenient and be worshipped. The prince's actual behavior didn't change much. The managed expectations changed everything. This video will teach you 8 ruthless principles of creating, manipulating, and managing expectations to control behaviors and reactions without direct confrontation. You will learn to install expectations in others that serve you, to violate expectations strategically for maximum impact, to manage perceptions so thoroughly that people voluntarily behave exactly as you need them to, thinking it was their idea all along. Now drop this affirmation in the comments. I am untouchable in thought. Machiavelli's law of expectation control. Machiavelli observed that princes who managed expectations skillfully could do less and be praised more than princes who did more, but managed expectations poorly. A prince who created expectations of brutality could show occasional mercy and be seen as benevolent. A prince who created expectations of constant generosity could never satisfy demands and would be seen as stingy when unable to give more. Same actions. Different expectations. Opposite outcomes. Expectations are reality filters that determine how your actions are interpreted. 1. Set baseline expectations low, then exceed strategically. Here's your first weapon. Deliberately set low baseline expectations, then occasionally exceed them for maximum impact. When people expect little from you, delivering slightly more creates disproportionate gratitude and loyalty. When people expect everything from you, delivering the same effort creates disappointment. Control the baseline, and you control how your actions are received. When you're constantly available, constantly giving, constantly exceeding expectations, you create a new baseline where extraordinary becomes expected. You train people to expect maximum effort. Then, when you deliver normal effort, they're disappointed even though normal effort is objectively good. You've destroyed your own leverage by setting expectations too high. Now watch strategic baseline management. Start by being reliably decent but not exceptional. Show up, do good work, but don't go above and beyond constantly. Establish a baseline of solid but not spectacular. This trains people to expect competent performance, nothing more. Then, occasionally, strategically, exceed expectations dramatically. Deliver something exceptional when it matters most. The contrast between the baseline and the exceptional moment creates massive impact. Think about people who always over-deliver versus people who usually deliver well, but occasionally blow minds. The constant over-deliverer gets taken for granted. The strategic over-deliverer gets praised disproportionately because they exceeded expectations. Same work, different baseline management, different results. The brutal practice: stop constantly exceeding expectations. Deliver solid work consistently to establish that as your baseline. Then strategically exceed expectations when it creates maximum leverage. Right before reviews, when visibility is high, when you need something. The contrast between baseline and exceptional moment multiplies the impact of your exceptional work. This is counterintuitive. You'd think constantly exceeding expectations builds maximum respect. It doesn't. It just raises the bar until nothing you do feels exceptional. Strategic baseline management with occasional exceptional spikes creates more perceived value than constant exceptional work. Control expectations, and you control perception. Drop this affirmation: I refuse to be psychologically dominated by others. 2. Create unpredictable patterns that prevent adaptation. Pay attention. Predictability allows people to adapt to you and take you for granted. Unpredictability prevents adaptation and keeps people psychologically alert around you. When people can predict your behavior, they stop actively managing how they treat you. When they can't predict you, they remain careful and strategic in every interaction. Unpredictability is power. When you're predictable, people adapt. They know you always respond kindly, so they treat you carelessly. They know you always help, so they ask without appreciation. They know you're always available, so they don't value your time. Your predictability gives them certainty, and certainty breeds complacency. They take you for granted because they know exactly what to expect. Now implement strategic unpredictability. Sometimes you're warm and helpful. Sometimes you're cold and distant. Sometimes you respond immediately. Sometimes you take days. Sometimes you go above and beyond. Sometimes you do exactly what was asked and nothing more. Create no pattern they can adapt to. Keep them uncertain about which version of you they'll encounter. Think about how you behave around unpredictable people versus predictable ones. Predictable people don't require careful management. You know how they'll respond. Unpredictable people keep you strategically engaged. You can't afford to treat them carelessly because you don't know how they'll react. That strategic engagement is what you want to create in others. The ruthless practice. Destroy any behavioral patterns people have adapted to. If you've been consistently warm, introduce periods of coldness. If you've been reliably available, become intermittently unavailable. If you've been predictably helpful, sometimes decline without explanation. Create uncertainty that prevents people from taking you for granted. Unpredictability is psychological power because it prevents adaptation. Most people fear that unpredictability will damage relationships. It will, with people who are exploiting your predictability. Those relationships should die. People who actually value you will adapt to your unpredictability by treating you more carefully. Your unpredictability sorts exploiters from respecters. Drop this affirmation. I control my focus. 3. Violate positive expectations to establish boundaries. Here's a power technique. Strategically violate positive expectations to establish that you're not controllable through expectations. When people expect you to say yes, say no. When they expect availability, be unavailable. When they expect compliance, refuse. This violation communicates that their expectations don't control you. You control you. When you consistently meet positive expectations, always helpful, always available, always agreeable, people learn they can control you by expecting things. They expect your help. You provide it. They expect your time. You give it. They expect compliance. You comply. Your pattern of meeting expectations becomes a control mechanism they exploit without realizing it. Now violate expectations strategically. When someone expects your help based on past patterns, decline. No explanation, no apology. Just, I can't do that. When they expect immediate response, go silent for days. When they expect you to accommodate their plans, be unavailable. Each violation communicates, your expectations don't control me. Think about how you feel when someone violates your positive expectations. Initially confusion, then forced recalibration. You can't assume their availability anymore. You can't take their help for granted. You have to ask rather than assume. That recalibration is exactly what you need to trigger. Force people to stop assuming and start asking. Force them to recognize your autonomy, the brutal practice. Identify expectations people have of you that you dislike. Expectations of constant availability, immediate response, automatic help, predictable compliance. Then deliberately violate those expectations without warning or explanation. The initial discomfort creates permanent boundary establishment. People learn they cannot control you through expectations. Some will complain you're not yourself or changing. Perfect. That complaint reveals they preferred the predictable version they could control through expectations. The new unpredictable version requires them to respect your actual boundaries rather than their installed expectations. Violation of expectations is boundary enforcement without confrontation. Drop this affirmation. I choose awareness over virtue. 4. Manage upward expectations through strategic undercommitment. Listen carefully. Always undercommit and overdeliver. Never the reverse. When you overcommit, you create expectations you might not meet. When you undercommit, you create space to exceed expectations easily. This isn't about being mediocre. It's about managing expectations so your actual performance consistently exceeds what was expected. When you overcommit, you create performance pressure and disappointment risk. I'll have this done by tomorrow creates the expectation of tomorrow delivery. If you deliver tomorrow, you met expectations. No special credit. If you deliver later, You failed expectations. Massive penalty. You created a scenario where your best case is neutral and your worst case is failure. Now practice strategic undercommitment. I'll need 3 days for this, when you know you can do it in 2. You've created an expectation of 3-day delivery. When you deliver in 2 days, you've exceeded expectations. Bonus credit. If unexpected problems arise and it takes 3 days, you met expectations. No penalty. You've created a scenario where your worst case is neutral and your best case is victory. Think about people who always overcommit versus people who undercommit and overdeliver. Overcommitters create constant disappointment even when they work hard. Undercommitters create constant pleasant surprise even when delivering normal work. Same effort, different expectation management, opposite perceptions. The ruthless practice. When committing to deadlines, timelines, or deliverables, always build in buffer. Give yourself more time than you need. Set the expectation lower than your actual capability. Then deliver earlier or better than expected. This consistent pattern of exceeding expectations builds a reputation for reliability and excellence, even if you're just delivering normal work ahead of managed expectations. This seems like sandbagging, and it is, but sandbagging is smart expectation management. People who promise the world and deliver most of it are seen as failures. People who promise less and deliver slightly more are seen as stars. Same delivery, different managed expectations. Control expectations and you control reputation. Drop this affirmation. I am untouchable in thought. 5. Create scarcity expectations. Around your availability. Pay attention to this dominance move. Train people to expect scarcity of your time, attention, and availability. When scarcity is expected, occasional access feels like a gift. When constant availability is expected, your presence feels like an obligation. Manage expectations of your availability, and you control how your presence is valued. When you're always available, you create expectations of constant access. People expect immediate responses. They expect you to make time whenever they need it. They expect your attention on demand. These expectations of abundance make your actual presence feel obligatory and low value. They take you for granted because scarcity was never established. Now create scarcity expectations. Respond slowly enough that fast responses feel rare. Be busy enough that free time feels limited. Have enough going on that full attention feels special. Train people to expect difficulty accessing you. When access is expected to be difficult, gaining access feels like winning. When access is expected to be easy, gaining access feels like your obligation. Think about how you value people based on access expectations. People who are always available feel low value because access is guaranteed. People who are rarely available feel high value because access is scarce. Same person, different availability expectations, opposite perceived value. Scarcity expectations create value perception. The brutal practice. Make yourself systematically less available. Respond slower. Be busier. Have less free time. Create waiting periods for access to you. Train everyone around you to expect that your time is scarce and valuable. Then, when you do give time or attention, it's received as valuable because it matched scarcity expectations. Your actual availability didn't change much. The expectations changed everything. This feels counterintuitive because you think availability shows you care. It doesn't. Availability shows you're not in demand. Scarcity shows you're valuable. Manage expectations towards scarcity, and your occasional availability becomes a gift instead of an obligation. Control availability expectations, and you control how your presence is valued. Drop this affirmation: I refuse to be psychologically dominated. 6. Install performance expectations in others through framing. Here's a control technique. Install expectations in others about how they should perform around you, then watch them voluntarily meet those expectations. When you frame someone as reliable, they become more reliable to match the expectation. When you frame them as unreliable, they often prove you right. Expectation framing controls behavior. When you treat people as if they're competent, they rise to meet competence expectations. When you treat them as incompetent, they often sink to those expectations. When you expect respect, people give more respect. When you expect disrespect, people give more disrespect. Your framing creates expectations that people internalize and voluntarily fulfill. Now weaponize expectation installation. When you want someone to be reliable, say, I'm counting on you because you're the most reliable person I know. You've installed a reliability expectation they'll now work to fulfill. When you want someone to respect boundaries, treat them as if you expect respect. I know you'll understand I need time for this. You've framed understanding as expected, making refusal awkward. Think about how you behave when someone expresses high expectations of you versus low expectations. High expectations make you want to rise to them. Low expectations give you permission to underperform. That's the power of expectation framing. It controls behavior by defining what's expected. People voluntarily conform to expectations because conforming feels like meeting standards rather than being controlled. The ruthless practice, when you want specific behavior from someone, frame them as already being the person who exhibits that behavior. Want more respect? I appreciate how respectful you are of boundaries. Want more reliability? You're the most dependable person I know. Want more effort? I know you're the type who goes above and beyond. Each frame installs an expectation they'll work to fulfill. This seems manipulative because it is. But expectation framing is how all socialization works. Parents frame children as helpful or smart to install those expectations. You're just doing consciously what others do unconsciously. Install expectations that serve you and watch people voluntarily fulfill them to match the identity you've framed. Drop this affirmation: I control my focus. 7. Strategic disappointment calibrates future expectations. Downward. Listen to this power move. Occasionally disappoint deliberately to calibrate expectations downward. When you consistently exceed expectations, you create an unsustainable performance baseline. Strategic disappointment resets expectations to realistic levels while training people not to take your exceptional performance for granted. When you always exceed expectations, that exceptional level becomes the new expected baseline. People adapt to your high performance and start expecting it as normal. Then, when you deliver merely good work, they're disappointed, even though good work is objectively solid. You've trapped yourself in an expectation spiral where nothing feels exceptional because everything has become expected. Now deploy strategic disappointment. After a period of exceeding expectations, deliberately deliver just adequate performance. Meet the minimum requirements but nothing more. Decline optional efforts. Show up but don't go above and beyond. This disappoints the elevated expectations you created, forcing people to recalibrate downward to more realistic expectations. Think about how occasional disappointment affects your perception of others. When someone consistently over-delivers, then delivers normally, you notice the decline and recalibrate expectations downward. You stop taking over-delivery for granted because you've experienced what happens when it stops. Strategic disappointment makes your exceptional moments feel exceptional again instead of expected. The brutal practice, after consistently exceeding expectations for a period, deliberately pull back. Do adequate work. Be less available. Provide less exceptional service. Let people experience the contrast between your exceptional performance and your adequate performance. This recalibrates their expectations downward, so your next exceptional moment feels exceptional again instead of expected. Some will complain you're slacking or changing. Perfect. That complaint reveals they'd adapted to unsustainable expectations. The temporary disappointment creates permanent expectation recalibration. Now, when you do exceed expectations, it's appreciated as exceptional rather than taken for granted as expected. Strategic disappointment is expectation management that preserves your ability to impress. Drop this affirmation. I choose awareness over virtue. 8. Create expectation. Uncertainty to maintain psychological dominance. Here's the final domination strategy. Maintain constant uncertainty about what to expect from you. When people can't predict whether you'll be warm or cold, available or distant, helpful or refusing, they remain in constant psychological alert around you. Uncertainty prevents adaptation and maintains power imbalance. When people know what to expect from you, they relax. They don't need to manage how they treat you because they know how you'll respond. They can be careless, demanding, or presumptuous because your predictable response pattern is already calculated. Certainty gives them psychological comfort, and you psychological powerlessness. Now maintain expectation uncertainty. Sometimes you're incredibly warm and generous. Sometimes you're cold and unavailable. Sometimes you help extensively. Sometimes you refuse casually. Sometimes you're engaged and present. Sometimes you're distant and brief. Create no pattern. Give no certainty. Keep them perpetually uncertain about which version of you they'll encounter today. Think about how you feel around people you can't predict. You remain careful. You manage your approach strategically. You can't afford to be careless because you don't know how they'll respond. That careful, strategic engagement is psychological power. Your unpredictability forces others to remain engaged and strategic around you, instead of relaxing into exploitation patterns. The ruthless practice. Eliminate any behavioral patterns people have learned to predict. Vary your availability randomly. Vary your warmth unpredictably. Vary your helpfulness without pattern. Make yourself a psychological mystery that can't be solved through pattern recognition. This uncertainty maintains your power by preventing anyone from confidently predicting and therefore controlling your responses. People will say you're inconsistent or moody. Let them. That perception of unpredictability is exactly what maintains your psychological dominance. When people can't predict you, they can't control you. When they can't control you through expectation management, you control them through expectation uncertainty. Unpredictability is invisible power that operates continuously without confrontation. Drop this affirmation. I am untouchable in thought. Dominate through expectation warfare. So here's what these 8 ruthless principles reveal. Whoever controls expectations controls behavior without direct confrontation. Set baselines low and exceed strategically for maximum impact. Create unpredictability that prevents adaptation. Violate positive expectations to establish boundaries. Undercommit and overdeliver to manage performance expectations. Create scarcity expectations around availability. Install performance expectations in others through framing. Deploy strategic disappointment to recalibrate expectations. Maintain expectation uncertainty to preserve psychological dominance. This isn't about being unreliable or incompetent. It's about strategic expectation management that gives you maximum control with minimum confrontation. Every expectation you allow others to install in you is a control mechanism they use to predict and manipulate your behavior. Every expectation you strategically install in them is a behavior control mechanism you operate invisibly. Stop living according to expectations others installed in you. Stop being predictable enough to be taken for granted. Stop exceeding expectations so consistently that exceptional becomes expected. Start managing expectations strategically. Control what people expect from you. Violate expectations that don't serve you. Install expectations in them that do serve you. Maintain enough unpredictability that they never fully adapt. Machiavelli would remind you that the most powerful princes ruled through managed expectations, not constant commands. They created expectations that made their occasional generosity seem extraordinary. They violated expectations strategically to demonstrate power. They installed expectations in subjects that generated voluntary compliance. Expectation management was invisible rulership, control without visible force. If this video taught you how to control behaviors through expectation warfare, hit that like button. Share it with someone ready to stop being controlled by others' expectations. Subscribe, because we're going to keep teaching you invisible power that operates without confrontation. Now drop this final affirmation. I am powerful and kind. Master expectations, control behaviors, dominate invisibly. Now go create, manipulate, and manage expectations so strategically that people voluntarily behave exactly as you need them to, thinking it was their choice all along.